Next, from the state capitol, we go one-on-one with Republican State Senator Larry Bomke, who is leaving the legislature at the end of the year. We'll get his take on how Governor Blagojevich operated, pension funding, and how the legislative votes are tied more to regional interests than partisan politics. This runs about 25 minutes.
Larry Bomke, thank you for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Thanks, Terry. It's nice to be here.
You were first elected in 1994, is that right?
Actually, 95 I was appointed. July of 95, the former Senator Karen Acera ran for mayor of Springfield and was elected, resigned her seat, and I was appointed in 95 and then elected in 96.
And you've announced that you will not be seeking re-election. Why are you deciding to leave the Illinois Senate?
Well, there's a number of reasons, Terry. One, the district changed pretty significantly. Right now you have Sangamon, Menard, and Logan County. The new district would have expanded. I'm only 45 minutes from the longest part of my district now. The new part of my district would have taken in the western part of Sangamon County, but gone to Missouri and down to almost Alton. And that's a huge area. And I believe that in 10 years ago, probably would have done it in a heartbeat. But if you're going to be a good public servant, you have to be out in your community. Can't be there once every 6 months. You need to be there regularly, once a month or more often. And one of the pleasing things I guess I hear from people is, I was going to call you, but I knew I'd see you. That's the kind of representative I think that a senator should be, or a member of the House. And my insurance agency just merged about a year and a half ago with another company, and I have more commitment to my private company now than I had before, and it just was not going to work out. So either the insurance would have to go, or I wouldn't be a good member of the General Assembly, in my opinion, and that's not fair to the people of the new 50th District. So that was the main reason that I chose not to run again.
You know, typically we talk with members of the legislature and we'll talk about pending business and what their views are on this issue or that issue. But in one hand, I wanted to talk to you more about your reflections of service and to perhaps give people a bit of an insight over these last number of years. It's hard to believe, what's that, almost 17 years ago?
17 years, yeah.
And when you joined the Senate back in 95, you know, Illinois was in an entirely different position then. We hadn't gone through the tragedy of the Ryan years and the Blagojevich years. We weren't facing bankruptcy. Having been here in the Senate over that time, what do you tell people? What went wrong?
Well, there are a number of things. Some due because of government, some just totally out of government's control. In 95, we probably had about a zero fund balance, a savings, if you will, and I saw that grow to $1.5 billion. And I vividly remember when Governor Ryan was governor, he decided not to run for re-election. We had consummated a budget, and it was in the fall of 2002. There was an election coming up. Jim Ryan, the former Attorney General, was running against a new guy by the name of Rod Blagojevich. But Governor Ryan recognized we were going into a recession, and he made attempts to reduce budgets back in about July and August, you know, not long after we had completed a budget in late May of that year, 2002. Made an attempt during veto session to expand his authority to transfer money from, I believe it's 2% up to 5%. I believe that's how much he wanted. He wanted the statutory authority to do that, and he was going to transfer the money into the fund balance. Passed out of the Senate. The Senate was controlled by the Republicans at that time, only to be held up in the House. Speaker Madigan didn't allow it to come for a vote. I'm sorry, that was in 2001. Then in the election cycle, 2002, he made another attempt. And of course, at that point, we had 9/11 in November, or September, excuse me, 9/11 hit, and caused a great deal of concern with people. a panic, if you will. The stock market dropped significantly, and so it just furthered our problem. So it was in the spring of 2002, Governor Ryan again tried to get that bill passed, again only to be held up in the House and never having gotten passed. But in 2002, spring of 2002, the bill had still passed the Senate. The governor tried to get it passed in the House and was not successful at having done so, didn't get it done. That would have given a little more cash, a little more cushion we would have had in a fund balance. As it turns out, it didn't happen. And then in November of the next year, Rod Blagojevich is elected governor. And I think many of us thought that this would be, new guy, first time in 26 years, so we had a Democrat governor. And many, myself included, thought the guy was he was somebody we could work with. He had a lot of charisma. And
I'll interject
Yeah.
to remind people. Now it seems odd, but I don't think any governor became governor of Illinois that had more goodwill.
Yeah, right.
And people, after the Ryan
Yes,
kind of scandal,
debacle,
people was like,
sure.
we thought Blagojevich was going to be a breath of fresh air.
Right.
First time the Democrats had come into the governorship
Yes.
in something like 25 years.
Yes.
And I think a lot of Republicans were
Right.
looking to work
Right.
with him and turn the state around.
Yeah, and myself included, and had conversations with Governor Blagojevich in the spring, and things just kind of, fell apart. Would no longer return calls. It just was a member of the General Assembly. I vividly recall, I think the governor of Iowa, trying to get a hold of him, and he had one of his staffers return the governor's call. And then the next year, the governor increased spending, increased some programs, kid care, and something that I voted against. Not that I'm opposed to children having insurance coverage, but we weren't able to pay our bills, and therefore it made no sense to add more liability to the General Revenue Fund. But it got passed. Family care was passed. And so as we're increasing spending, the revenue is going down, And so we were creating an imbalance. And
One of the
that's what
Democratic members said to me that the trouble with Rod Blagojevich is he spent like a Democrat and taxed like a Republican.
Well, I don't know that I think I would argue, because he did not raise taxes other than maybe some cigarette taxes. He did try to pass a gross receipt tax, you remember?
Right,
May have
right.
recalled that. And that didn't go over well. That did not get passed. And he recognized that he had an imbalance, but he couldn't come up with a reasonable revenue solution.
How much of the problem would you say that where we are today lies at the Rod Blagojevich, or does it go back? We're obviously facing problems
Sure.
of pensions and Medicaid
Right.
are two of the major issues we're
Right.
dealing with this spring.
Right.
It's probably not fair, in my estimation,
Sure.
to lay that all at the feet of Rod Blagojevich.
No, you're right. It isn't fair to do that, because members of the General Assembly and a governor did not pay into the pension system. Fortunately, the year before I came in, Governor Edgar instigated legislation that required us to pay the pensions before we paid anything else. In other words, for every dollar that came out of pensions, there wasn't a dollar put back in to replace it. That changed in 94, actually before I became a member of the General Assembly. The unfortunate thing is, you can blame Governor Blagojevich for increasing Medicaid spending. That was the child care and family care. And he changed the statute. We didn't make a pension payment for 2 years, which I voted against both of those. So yeah, you can't blame him for everything, but certainly a large part of it he was responsible for, by increasing spending when we didn't have the money, and then foregoing payments to the pension system over a 2-year period, which amounted to about $2.2 billion.
Bring it more to the present day. Knowing what you know about the pensions and cost, what's the future for the state of Illinois? Where are we going to be in 5 or 10 years?
There's no question, unless we insert more revenue, have more revenue, and help the pensions out, and that's not likely to happen. There are going to have to be changes, or the pensions, the 5 systems that the state's responsible for is going to be in dire situation. Now, how we can craft something that's constitutional may be left up to the courts to decide. I haven't seen the governor's latest proposal. I mean, I've heard what he wants to do, but I don't know how he wants to get there. Now, I did hear President Cullerton indicate he believed it was constitutional, and it was Senator Cullerton's person who said that originally what was being proposed wasn't, and I agreed with that analysis.
Eric Madeira,
Yes.
the governor's
Yes.
lawyer. And I believe Senator Cullerton's taken the position that if the unions were to agree to the changes, that it would be constitutional, if I can paraphrase perhaps what
I
he's
see.
saying.
Well, I think probably what he means is they would be challenged in court. Maybe that's what he means.
Well, I think
because-
that you can alter the agreement, kind of a labor management.
Except
I don't want to
that-
be speaking for.
Well, no, and I understand that, but there's something different. An agreement or contract is different than the Constitution. And if these were protected in at the Constitutional Convention in 1970, and as I understand it, that's different than statute. And we do change laws that can be changed, but I'm not sure that's a constitutional protected benefit. So, if the unions don't agree, there will be a court challenge, and it could tie it up for a number of years. If it's not challenged, the constitutionality of it, then, we go on and the changes are made.
And you obviously have quite a number of state workers
Right,
in
I
your
have a
district
number of-
representing, I mean, you're here in Springfield, and as you
Right.
say, you surround. What do you say you must hear from constituents all the time that are complaining about this and saying, it's not their fault, it's the
Right.
state didn't make its
Right.
payments?
Right.
What do you tell them?
Well, and that's true, to some degree. That is absolutely correct, to some degree. If we had made our payments, we wouldn't be in the same situation we're currently in. Or as bad a situation. I don't know that it would have totally corrected it. Public employees have a defined benefit plan, and unlike anyone, or it's a rarity to find that. And to guarantee a benefit, if you go to work for the state of Illinois today, you know that you won't know how much money you're making, but you'll be making a percentage, and what that percentage is of your current salary at that time in 20, 30, 35, or 40 years. That's just not the case with most private employers. It's a defined contribution. It's defined how much money will go into the pension, but there's no guarantee what you'll get out of it. With the stock market problems after 9/11 and the recession, that's caused the value of the stock to drop significantly, adding to significantly more liability.
I think a lot of people who never followed the stock market are starting to realize how much
Yeah.
they might think it's a pension and they're not tied to the stock market, but
Yes.
you have to have market returns to support the level of benefits.
Absolutely, right.
And obviously, if those fall off, then you're not going to have the assets
That's exactly
there.
right, yes.
But move along to, again, I'm interested in somebody having had this experience, which few people will ever have, obviously, in their life, to serve
Yeah.
in the legislature.
Right.
And being we'll say a downstater, you're here in Central Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of the political mix of the state? And I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
But some people look at the state of Illinois as a dysfunctional family. Is that fair, or are we too lopsided politically with the representation in Chicago? You have a couple of lawmakers here in Central Illinois say we ought to have Chicago break away politically from the state of Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, that's not going to happen. I mean, the reality is you can file all kinds of bills you want, and it gets good press pop, but it's not going to happen because there are a large number. The bulk of the population is northern Illinois, Chicago, and this is the suburbs. So that's not going to occur.
I don't know that anyone took that seriously because, first of all, the state of Illinois would have virtually a much smaller budget without this
Right.
economic
Right.
engine of Chicago. But I guess you also hear from your constituents,
Yeah.
I presume,
Sure.
the frustration in Chicago, the Chicago machine. again, kind of as an exit interview. I mean, having
Right.
been in this position, you're
What-
looking to leave. What are your thoughts having worked with these people? Is that a bunch of hooey, or is there something to it?
Well, no, I don't know that there's anything to it. And the interesting thing is, I think most people believe that the things we do around here are partisan. That's all we do. The truth of the matter is that's not the case. Most of the stuff we do are not. It's more regionalized. Downstate, pro-gun, pro-life, Democrats, Republicans. Upstate, Republicans, Democrats, pro-choice, anti-gun. And so it's more regionalized rather than partisanship. I mean, you'll find that John Sullivan and myself rarely vote different from one another. John's a Democrat to the west of me. His district is with mine now, and so it's a rarity that occurs, that we will vote different. Yet he's a Democrat and I'm a Republican. So I don't know, there's no question that one party does control the process. And there's no question that historically, philosophically, Republicans and Democrats differ in that historically Democrats are more aligned with increasing government or more social programs, and Republicans are for reducing programs and encouraging entrepreneurship and growing the economy through the private sector. Now, not all Democrats believe in growing government, but historically that's been the philosophical difference, and I think we have that today. That's why it's made it very difficult. I think Governor Quinn is a really good guy. There's no question in my mind that what he wants is what he believes and is the best interest of the state of Illinois. Really believe that. I think Rod Blagojevich was a phony. Maybe George Ryan was too, although I think Ryan was a little more in tune to good, better government. Rod Blagojevich was only interested in promoting himself. Governor Quinn really is interested in doing what he believes is in the best interest of the state. Philosophically, we may differ on how we achieve that objective, but he truly is sincere in trying to do the best he can for the state of Illinois.
As we tape this, the Senate's going to be coming in a little bit, so we don't have too much time, but putting on a partisan hat and just kind of looking, first of all, has partisanship, as you say, the outside public just already looks in terms of party, and that's not the case. But has partisanship improved or gotten worse over the period of time that you've been here as far as the battles? And if you would too, I'd be interested in your view just within the Republican Party. We have such a skew within the Republican Party of Illinois where it's, I think, searching for its identity. Does it want to be a more moderate party? You have others who say, they're not a Republican, they're a rhino. They're a Republican in name only.
Yeah.
And those people that would say that, I don't know, maybe they want people to pass a severe litmus test on what should we have as a party identification? Let's take it with the Republicans first.
Well, you can agree that one of the problems you have, and this is true whether you're a Democrat or Republican, there are certain segments of the parties that believe you ought to be one way and that way only, and you ought to agree on every issue, and it's either our way or the highway. And I recall having a conversation with Dave Gross, who's the new chief of staff for President Cullerton. And he commented to me that back in the 80s, the Democrats had a problem with the real liberals of the party, and they were out to defeat those who weren't quite as liberal as them, but still Democrat. And I think we have a little of that today in the Republican Party. The Tea Party, I agree with about 95% of their agenda. Maybe I don't agree with 5%, and because I don't, I may not be in step with them. And that's a problem when you start running Republicans against Republicans. And so I think I see that happening. But for the most part, I think the general public wants conservative to a degree. I had an interesting, call from a guy 2 years ago who said that he belonged to the Tea Party, but he thought we needed to raise taxes. And I found that kind of odd. And when I questioned him on it, he said, well, I have a developmentally disabled child that can't get services. And I realized that we've got to have more revenue for that to happen. Well, unless it hits you directly, you know, it's easy to say no more services, cut everybody off. And I think you have to be sensitive to everyone. And there are people that have needs that need to be met. There are people that are having needs met that don't need the help. And we need to do a better job of policing those people. Medicaid fraud comes to mind. That's a big issue. I had 3 former state police Medicaid fraud investigators, retired now, in to see me a couple of years ago. And they talked about one hospital in Chicago as an example. I know I'm digressing and jumping all over here. But, and they said that this particular hospital, when this one policeman retired, they had determined something like $500 million in fraud. And what was happening was there were 17 hospitals hiring people off the street, Medicaid recipients, to come to the hospital. The hospital would be paid, and they would pay these people, and they go from one hospital to another. That's just one example of many that what's going on in the state, and we're not doing a good job in policing that type. So that's what I mean about the person that doesn't need the help, that's getting the help, and we need to do a much better job in policing.
I don't want to make you late, but again, just on the issue of partisanship, and what strikes me is one irony of the financial crisis the state finds itself in is that all the members of the legislature, or a good number of them, yes, I think may be changing their partisan hats because of the dire crisis that finally they have to do something,
right,
and there's no more putting it off until tomorrow.
Yes.
Do you sense, I mean, that's my view, and I just didn't know what yours. Do you sense that happening within the legislature?
Absolutely. There's no question. Speaker Madigan has, as has Minority Leader Cross, kind of taken the bulls by the horn with his pension. Boy, we don't want to hear about that. I know that my constituents don't want to hear about pensions being changed. The truth of the matter is, it's gotten so dire, and they realize if they don't correct the situation, that there won't be a pension for anyone. And that's the issue. And the same is true with Medicaid. Philosophically, Governor Quinn and I disagree, but he realizes we've got to get a handle on Medicaid expenditures, or it's going to consume more and more and more until it takes up the whole general revenue budget. And that's why he's proposing $2.7 billion in cuts this year, trying to get that under control.
The governor said we have a rendezvous with reality in his budget address.
Yes.
Last question, just what's the future for Larry Bomke, and sum up how have you enjoyed or not enjoyed your time in the Illinois legislature?
Well, I've absolutely enjoyed my time in the Illinois General Assembly. I'm fortunate in that, Terry, I come to work every day, my capital, and I kind of like it when nobody else is here and get up and down the elevators quick. But you have an opportunity to really take advantage of this beautiful building when you walk around. It is a beautiful building. And I'm very pleased that people have allowed me the opportunity to serve them in the 50th Senatorial District over the last 17 years. Looking forward to getting on with my life and pursuing my business a little more. But I've enjoyed it, and I can't thank people enough for allowing me the opportunity.
Well, Senator Bomke, we wish you well, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.